You're listening to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast with your host, Leticia Ringe, and this is episode number 27.
I genuinely believe that the only way you can really stand out, really actually build a committed audience is if you truly embrace what makes you unique. Because we are all unique in our own way. We all have our own voice. We all have our own things to say. And there is space for everyone. But you're not going to get there by copying anybody else. You really have to embrace what makes you, you. And then that's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd.
Welcome back to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. I am your host, Leticia Ringe, and this podcast is designed to inspire, empower, and support you on the journey of uncovering your truth and purpose in the world. Welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. It is such a treat to have you here as always. And whether you're new or you've been listening since day one, seriously, a really big thank you and warm welcome. Today is our first interview back for season 2 of the podcast, and I've been so excited to share this conversation with you. The woman I have on today is someone who I met again through Jess Lively. I mean, it's just so incredible, all of the wonderful people I've been connected with through Jess, but really it makes perfect sense. And I just want to begin this episode by sharing this thought with you. Jess Lively was one of my most inspiring expanders when I started on my own self-discovery journey. Through her work, I've been connected with so many people. One, other teachers like Brooke Castillo, who I adore, and Elisa Vitti, who I also adore. And 2, with so many like-minded and like-hearted women. Some men, but mostly women. And this has just been so wonderful. I've met so many of my clients through the community. I've met so many people that I work with through the community. I've met so many friends through the community. You know, every month I hang out with a group of people that I met through one of Jess Lively's meetups. And today, our guest, I met her at a Jess Lively meetup as well. So if you're someone who's looking for people in your life who are inspiring, expansive, and also who just get you, I highly recommend reaching out to the people within the community of those who are inspiring you. So if you're listening to this, for example, you are a listener of the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast, and so it is very, very likely that other people within the community are going to be like-minded. It's a wonderful place to meet people. So with that said, you can always come and hang out over on Instagram, get to know some of the people within the community. We'd love to hear from you. Talk about what you love from the episodes or just anything that's going on for you. Just come and hang out. It's such a fun place to connect. You can find me at Create a Life That Is Beautiful. And I would love to know whether you'd be interested in a private Facebook community, so a private Facebook group where we, people a part of the Create a Life That Is Beautiful community, can hang out and talk about all the different things that we're interested in, and also provide you with a space to meet other people who are part of this community. If that is something that you want, that you're interested in, please could you get in touch with me to let me know, and I will make that happen. Otherwise, without further ado, let's get into today's conversation. I am interviewing Miranda Mills. She is a lifestyle blogger and podcaster. She is the woman behind Miranda's Notebook and her podcast, Tea Tattle, where she interviews successful creative women. I absolutely adore Miranda's blog, podcast and her Instagram. She takes beautiful photographs, lots of flowers, lots of beautiful delights around London and the countryside here in England. And most of all, for me, capturing the beautiful things in life, including literature, which is a really big influence on Miranda's podcast and also her blog. It's so wonderful to see how she's incorporated all of these different lifestyle things with her creativity and with her literary background and interests. I absolutely love Miranda's voice. She's got a really authentic voice to her, and I think she's a wonderful example for you listening of someone who is really just being herself. Now, today's episode, there are so many juicy topics that we're exploring, but we'll be talking about podcast, about feeling you can only be creative in one way and what creativity really means. We'll be talking about having a serious career versus a creative career, generally creative fulfillment and how important it is for our overall fulfillment. She'll be talking about blogging, writing and photography, evolving your craft, refining your skills, dealing with comparison, overwhelm, and perfectionism, protecting your creative drive, self-care, how Miranda made the shift from her life as a teacher to what she does today now as a lifestyle blogger and podcaster. We'll also be talking about trusting yourself, whether or not you need a niche, and Miranda's advice, of course, for finding purpose. This is a really inspiring conversation and I'm so excited for you to dive in and listen to it. One more announcement before we dive in is that if you haven't already checked it out, I now also have a YouTube channel which does include these episodes, but what it includes that you won't find anywhere else are 5 to 10 minute videos where I will be answering a specific question or concern that I'm hearing from you listening, the people in my community. And so I'm answering that for you in these videos. So go over there and check it out if that's something that sounds supportive for you, and share with me which videos you're enjoying most so that I can continue to support you in the best way possible. Okay, my beautiful friend, let's dive into this episode. Get prepared to be inspired. Miranda Mills, here we go. Hi, Miranda. Welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, Leticia. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to chat to you.
It's great to chat to you as well. So to get us started, could you let our beautiful listeners know a little bit about who you are and what you're currently creating in the world today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Miranda and I write a lifestyle blog called Miranda's Notebook. And I also host a podcast called Tea Tattle that celebrates female creativity. I always say it's a podcast for creative females with a literary twist because I do talk about books quite a lot on the podcast. Reading is a real passion of mine, and I interview lots of authors on it as well. But yes, and I also do some freelance writing and content creation for brands and creative businesses. So that in summary is basically what I do.
Oh, I love that you say celebrates female creativity. I think that's a really beautiful way to put it, and that it has that literary spin. I know how much you enjoy reading and, writing. So that's beautiful. And, your blog, Miranda's Notebook, did you want to just tell us a little bit more about what you sort of write about there?
Yeah, so it is a real general lifestyle blog. I cover London, sort of restaurants and cafes that I like. I do a bit of style and beauty. I do travel. I do books. It really is a little bit of a mix of everything, but I feel that's very reflective of who I am as a person, because I think it would be hard for me to write a very niche subject because I'm interested in so many different things. So I love writing about culture and food and travel and fashion. And my blog just gives me the freedom to do that. So I really enjoy that about it.
Oh, that's a beautiful answer. And I think such a wonderful example for people because, sometimes we can start these things and think like that we really need to, find our specific topic that we're talking about. But, there has to be room for that growth because, as we evolve, so is what we're creating and especially what we're writing about.
Absolutely. I mean, a niche blog really works for some people. There are so many great niche blogs out there, but I feel that the lifestyle category is almost a niche in itself now. And you can really do a lot with that. And there's just so many opportunities actually that come through from writing about a lot of different subjects. So that's something that I really enjoy. But in the end, it's also just my interest. It's what I like to write about. It's what I actually do. And that's always important to me. It's just really being authentic to who I am as a person.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. And so, Miranda, tell us, how did you get into, starting your blog and doing the podcast? What was life like before you began all of that?
Oh my goodness. Well, I had such a roundabout journey to get to where I am today. And I would say that I'm definitely still on that journey as well. I mean, there's so much more I want to do, and I'm still growing. But I think the common thread that's run through my life has always been very creative. The very first career I ever wanted was to be a ballerina, and I did so much ballet when I was young. I was really dedicated to it. I think I did at least 21 hours training a week. And it was what I absolutely loved, and I couldn't imagine my life without it. But then when I was 15, I got a really bad knee injury, and I had to give up ballet. And I think that was quite a hard transition for me because although I loved other things like writing and reading, and I was also very academic, I think I just lost that feeling of being a really creative person, or I only saw myself as being creative in one way. So I spent a long time after that trying to figure out what I wanted to do, really trying to fit myself into a typical career path. I mean, I studied linguistics at university, but then I did a law conversion course because I just thought that would be a really practical thing to do. I know that you come from a law background as well, but I really didn't enjoy it at all. And I remember going to these corporate law offices and just thinking, when I was interviewing, and just thinking, what am I doing here? This feels so not me. So then I spent some time really trying to decide what actually was me. I did a bit of work in publishing. I tried sort of museum internships, and then I wound up going into teaching, which at first I did enjoy it, but I would say that it wasn't as creative a job as I had expected it to be. I went into primary school teaching, so I thought it would be sort of very creative and very fulfilling. And although I loved working with children and I did find that part of the job really fulfilling, it still felt like something was really missing from my life. And I remember I had such a pivotal moment. It was in my first year of teaching full time, and I had a boyfriend at that time. And I remember thinking one day, oh my goodness, this is going to be my life. Like, I'm a teacher. My boyfriend at the time was a lot more interested in settling down, getting married, that type of thing than I was. And I just thought, this is going to be my life. I can get married, have kids, and be a teacher. And although I'm not saying that isn't a great life, it is. But to me in that moment, I was just terrified by that idea. And I just thought there has to be more. And this just doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel like I'm living the life I'm meant to be living. So I had to be really reflective at that point. And I realized that what I had always come back to throughout my sort of early to mid 20s was blogging. Like I'd first started a blog, I think when I was 21, but I was so sporadic with it. I hardly ever did it that, I mean, I barely grew an audience. It was, it wasn't anything particularly important, but I realized it was what I came back to in times of stress or at times where I just felt I needed a creative outlet. And it was kind of that day that I decided next year I'm going to drop to teaching part-time. I'm going to really pursue blogging more seriously. I'm going to start a proper blog and I'm just going to see what happens. So that's the story of how I started Miranda's Notebook. And then from there, the podcast just felt like a really natural extension. I've always loved listening to podcasts and I really wanted to do my own one. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to try it. And I'm so glad I did because I love it.
And what do you think is the best thing about having a podcast?
Well, I think it's just a much more intimate way to sort of converse with your followers. I think that people get much more of a feeling of who you really are when they can listen to your voice. So although I love writing, podcasting just feels like a more immediate way to communicate. And I also just love getting to meet and to talk to lots of different creative women. I mean, I knew from the start that I wanted to use the podcast to really celebrate female creativity. And I started Tea Tattle almost 2 years ago now. And that was just very important to me right from the beginning. I've always believed in supporting other women, helping to uplift other women. And I love being able to do that through the podcast. So it's just a real joy to me.
It's such a great way to connect people as well, your community with the people who, you've connected with, or you've read their books or their work, or they've inspired you in some way. It's they're all expanders for you and for your community.
Exactly. I mean, I always get so excited when a Tea and Tattle listener gets in touch and they say how much they enjoyed the latest episode and how they went out and they bought the book, for instance, of the author that I've had on the show and that they've really enjoyed it. And I think that does really help build trust with your audience too, when they follow along and they also enjoy the content that you're promoting, the sort of people that you're saying inspire you and can inspire others, which I think is really wonderful.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because, the way that we connected was through Jess Lively, going to one of her meetups. And
that's right.
Yeah. So we were both listening to, her podcast at the time. And I think this was, you were listening to her work maybe before she went into all of the flow work, the original Jess. That's how I sort of found her work as well, and then continued listening along. But it's just so beautiful to see how that's a really great example of how it can connect people within your community as well with each other.
Exactly. I think that is really wonderful. I think that's always a wonderful thing about podcasting or blogging or Instagram or YouTube. I mean, whatever medium you really choose to explore, there's always a way to really build a community around what you do and to connect with other people. And that's such a huge advantage of social media.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to just go back to something you mentioned in the beginning of your story, which was this, feeling like you could only be creative in one way. And, that was through, the dancing. And I think that this is a big one for a lot of people because, especially the way that we learn about creativity, growing up through school, there's different, channels of that. There's our art, maybe it's creative writing, like maybe we don't even see it as, one of the things I like to use as an example is when I was in high school, I loved writing essays on, 19th century literature, exploring the context, the interpretation of it. I loved that. But when it came to creative writing, the creative writing piece in my exams, I always felt blocked doing that. So I thought that I just wasn't a creative person, because
Mm.
the way that I could creatively express myself was in a different way to what I thought creativity at its core was, which was like, drama, art, this creative writing, maybe dancing, but I wasn't interested in any of this. And
Yeah.
so for me, a big part of my own journey as well has been exploring creativity. How do you define creativity?
I think it's such a loose term. I truly believe that everyone, and I mean everyone, is creative. It's just they need to discover in which way they actually are creative. But I think anyone who loves cooking is
Yes.
creative. You're creating something from that every day. Anyone who loves writing, but photography, there are just so many ways to be creative. I mean, my dad is a physicist and he's incredibly creative. He has to think up answers to questions that don't even exist yet, in a way. He has to make all sorts of creative predictions about the world. And so I think that truly everyone is creative. But I think it's so true that normally the definition of creativity is very narrow. You're taught that you can only be creative in certain ways. And also, often, I think people feel that, oh, it's fine to do dance or writing or have those interests when you're young. But once you hit adulthood, that stops. And it's like, okay, now you've got to do something serious.
Oh, that's so funny. That the word that came into my mind just before you said it was serious, and even so you might have maybe an extracurricular activity that's your creative outlet, but then, the core is something that's serious, or that's something that you feel like we need to have as adults.
Mm, yeah. Exactly. But I think actually what's so harming is when you don't find an outlet for your creativity that is truly innate. I mean, I can see that from having been a primary school teacher. Everyone is born wanting to create something and with a really lively imagination. And I think it's so sad that so often that doesn't get carried on to adulthood, or only if you're really, really lucky or brave enough to, really take that step to doing something different.
Absolutely, because it's asking you to trust in something that's, unknown in a lot of ways, something that you can't necessarily predict or control.
Exactly. But I think, I mean, the blogging boom, this evolution of social media has been amazing for so many people because it's showing so many how they can be creative in all these different kinds of ways. I mean, for me, for instance, I love writing, but I also really adore photography. And I often felt before blogging really came along, there was this idea that if you're a really good writer, then you're not maybe a very visual person, or that the two don't always combine. Whereas for me, my photography is just as important to me as the written content that I put on my blog. Like, I like both to be as amazing as possible. And I love expressing my creative vision through both of those ways, both through writing and photography. And I love the way that blogging has really shown that those things are very important and that people in general are actually very visual creatures.
Oh, that's a great example. And also, that just reminds me, I love your Instagram feed. Your
Oh,
posts, they're
thank
so
you.
beautiful, like so beautifully curated. Your photos are gorgeous. And, and of course, also the posts that you write with them, they really complement each other. But I love that you gave that as an example, because I think that's right. We can easily categorize ourselves as only one and not the other. And what I think also the whole blogging boom has done has meant people who don't consider them as, A+ writers or, professional photographers are still able to have a go and enjoy the, creative expression that's involved in that, rather than the I need to be the best at this before I could even put myself out there, and invest all this time and energy into this. It's just there's a playfulness there, and
Exactly.
at the
Yeah,
same time allowing yourself to be, connected with all these people.
Yeah, I was just going to say the exact same thing. I think there's this real sense of play, of fun, of freedom that goes into what you can do with your Instagram account, for instance. And I absolutely do love that. I mean, I'm in no way a professional photographer, but I do now get paid for some of my photography, which feels amazing. And I've seen how my skills have grown so much over the years, just from having that freedom to practice and to also just start trusting in myself and my own vision. And I don't think I ever would have done that without blogging and without Instagram.
Oh, I love that you mentioned trust there. I think that's a really big part of the process with creativity. Could we just talk about maybe, the evolution of, blogging and podcasting, what you've learned since, beginning both Miranda's Notebook and Tea and Tattle?
Yes, well, I mean, speaking of my personal evolution, I think something that I've really learnt along this path is that you should always be evolving. I think at the beginning, I used to be scared of making changes, or if I felt I had to change something or stop doing one thing that I felt wasn't working very well, that I'd failed in some way, that I'd misjudged a step, or that, maybe I shouldn't have to change if I were already doing it the way it's supposed to be done. But over the years, what I've learned is that actually that's just a sign of growth and of your own personal but also professional evolvement, really, is that you do have to continually readjust, reevaluate, look at what's working, what isn't working. If you get excited by something like podcasting or video, pay attention to that. Think about how you can bring that into your brand, and always, always, always try to up the game. I mean, I always try to improve my photography. I've worked so hard over the last few years. I always try to improve my writing. I think about how I can make my podcast interviews better. So learning to just naturally evolve your work and tweak things all the time is actually really important, and it's not something to be scared about either.
And that the word you use there, tweak, I think is really important, because sometimes it is just these really small shifts, and when we're constantly continuing to grow and evolve, all of these little shifts that we do end up bringing about like some pretty significant growth and changes and improvement on whatever we're doing. We're perfecting our craft.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's just so important to realize, don't be scared of change. Change is a good thing, and it will lead to growth. It will lead you to becoming aware of other aspects of social media, for instance, that you really enjoy, or ways that you can just improve your content to provide more value, because that's always what I want to do. I want to give people as much value as possible as I can from what I create. And I have to consistently change things. I mean, social media, it's such a changing world. It's such a changing platform. Things change all the time. And if you don't want your content or your brand to feel a little bit stale, then you do need to adapt while still keeping to your common threads, your common themes, your common values.
That's such wonderful advice, especially like that, this focus on value for your community, whoever you're trying to serve. I think that going in with that intention behind whatever you're doing is really, really important. How can you provide more value to whoever your audience is? And the point that you made about needing to, for our own fulfillment, needing to keep changing and growing and evolving is also really key.
Exactly. Because I mean, it can be hard, it is a tough world. You can feel discouraged if you think your numbers aren't going up enough, or you're not getting enough views, or whatever you're comparing yourself to. And it's human too to compare sometimes, to also feel down sometimes. And I think what keeps me sane is really thinking about, but all the time I'm improving my skills. And that in the end is what no one can take away from me. And that is what is really, really important. Like I've so much improved my photography skills, my writing. I now know how to record and edit podcasts, which I didn't 2 years ago. So I think it's when you can really track your self growth, your self improvement, and these skills that you develop, that you can remember to feel proud of yourself and the work that you're doing.
Oh, that's yes, yes, absolutely. And it's like I'm just thinking when I used to go to the gym when I started, getting into my exercise routine, and I was sort of on this program, and I got to every single day write down, what was the weight I was lifting, how many reps I was doing, or whatever it was, and then the next week I would try and build on that. And what I found so key to me to staying on track with that, workout program was the ability to track my progress and to see myself growing. And that, gave me the momentum to continue going. And then, if I had have looked back to where I started, it was massive by the time I finished the program. But that's a really beautiful way, I think, to bring this into our creative projects or, just life in general, really being able to look back at where we've come from and celebrating, seeing that growth there. That's so important to keeping us, moving forward.
Absolutely. I think there's too much emphasis sometimes on only using numbers, number of followers, for instance, to track your growth.
Yep.
Whereas, in fact, like you say, what's really important to track and to remember is actually your own growth and the level of skill that you start to possess. I mean, whenever I feel a bit down about Instagram or whatever, I go back and I look at my really old photos on Instagram and I think, oh, but I've improved like so much since then. And you have to remember that sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. And so do you think when it comes to dealing with comparison on, social media in particular, that this focus on, okay, well, what is my next step? How am I improving? Has that been what's been key for you, not being sort of overwhelmed by the comparison trap that a lot of people talk about and, is definitely something that we all sort of notice from time to time?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, like you say, I think everyone compares themselves to someone else sometimes. That's only natural. But how to stop feelings of overwhelm, at least for me, what I found really helpful is, like you say, thinking about the way I've improved my own skills and feeling proud of that achievement. And also going back to the content, I'm really of the mindset that content is king. And as long as I can feel good about the work that I'm doing and think, well, at every step I've done my very best. And that is all I can do. And actually, I'm proud of the work that I'm putting out there. I think that is what really helps. And in the end, that's what makes good opportunities come your way, is if you always put the focus on just delivering quality content. That in the end is what really matters more than the numbers even. It's how good your content is and how consistent you are with it.
Consistency, yes, so important. How do you deal then with, like perfectionism?
Well, that is always hard for me. I've always been a bit of a perfectionist. I think a lot of people who go into this type of thing often are, because it's a topic of conversation that crops up a lot with me and with people that I know working within social media. So that is a real problem. I think for me, I have to remember to just not be too hard on myself. That's definitely one of my biggest faults. I can be too self-critical. And I think especially when you're trying to pursue a goal or career that is a little bit out of the ordinary, in the end, you have to learn to just really trust and rely on your own judgment. So you've got to think, I'm doing the best that I can right now. And actually, I do know what is good for me. I have to rely on my own opinion. And if things don't go perfectly, well, nothing ever does. I mean, perfection really is a mirage. It's a fantasy. It doesn't exist. So you have to understand that. And if you can think, but I'm doing my best, this is a learning curve. It's a journey that I'm on. I am going to make mistakes, but I can always learn from them. And that's just what I really try to hold on to. And also, if I sense that I'm getting particularly negative or beating myself up too much, or I'm getting into that kind of negative spiral, I've learned that that's often just a sign of something else, like that I need more rest, or maybe I'm just a little bit bored of one project I'm doing at the moment. I need to shift my focus somewhere else and just feel that fire again, and then go back to concentrating on that other thing. So I think it's learning what triggers you and how to deal with that and come out of that.
Oh, that's great advice. So true. Sometimes we just need to, have our perspective sort of shifted slightly. And it's so funny, one evening you might look at something and think, this is the worst thing I've ever created. And then go back to it in even just the next day and be like, this isn't so bad at all. This is actually really good. It's actually incredible the shifts that we can have within ourselves in such a short amount of time.
Oh, that's so true. And I've found another tool that's really helpful for me. Because sometimes at the end of the day, I can feel like, oh, what have I accomplished today? Or I didn't do this right. I didn't do that well enough. I didn't get enough done, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll actually write down what I did accomplish in the day, what I am also grateful for from that day, what went well, what maybe I could improve on. And I find that such a calming exercise. And it's amazing to me how often I forget the positives that happen during the day and I only remember the negative things. And then that's all I'm telling myself is those negative things, which is really bad to do that. So I think making this conscious decision to sit down and think, no, wait a minute, what were all the positives that happened today? And then you realize how many positive things did happen.
Yes, it's so incredible the way we forget all of those things and just focus on the negative. I experience the same thing, and like you, I like to do this sort of evening review as well. And I think that, we need to be able to celebrate. We need to be able to recognize and appreciate all the things that we have had that have been, to our advantage, that we have been, producing before we can really allow space for, the growth or for the next iteration of whatever it is we're doing, because otherwise we are really coming from this scarcity mindset, and so all we can see are all the issues, all the problems. We're not making space for what the solution is, like, to move forward.
Exactly. And I think, like you say, having that scarcity mindset is so bad for creativity. It just drains you of your own creativity when you have that kind of mindset. So I think it's so important when that starts happening that you recognize it and that you have your own solutions to deal with that, and then just come out the other side, know how to fire yourself up again.
Absolutely. And like you said before, sometimes it can be just a matter of, needing rest, not having a lot of, feeling like you don't have a lot of space in your life. Maybe you've just, you haven't been able to, get out and move, or, you haven't been eating healthily. There's all these other things that, are sort of creating our foundation to be able to feel like we have the space.
And I mean, that can be hard to do. I mean, you're an entrepreneur yourself, you're running your own business. I know how that's so stressful, and it can be easy to just work all the time and forget that actually your number one priority, and this is what I have to remind myself all the time too, your number one priority should be you, not your business, because your business doesn't work if you don't.
Yes, this is something I've had to recenter on recently because so I love working, especially because I actually love what I do now. But even when in my previous jobs as a lawyer, as a consultant, I always worked hard because I enjoy working. It energizes me generally. And so now that I'm doing, what I love and I'm so inspired by it all, I find it really difficult to stop. And I've had to really make that I've had to be really disciplined on myself, no working after a certain time. This is when I need to wind down. And this is particularly difficult because I tend to get a lot of my creative downloads in the evening. So I really love the late hours of the evening to be working. But then if I work too late, that, obviously I can't wind down for my sleep. And then the next day is affected because you can't buy back your sleeping time. You need to have a certain amount of sleep each day. I find I just cannot function properly. So being really disciplined when it comes to the amount of sleep I'm getting, and then also getting outside to go for a walk at least, even if it's just for 20 minutes, half an hour each day. All of these like baseline things, I've been really noticing just how important it is for me to maybe do at the beginning of my day. Otherwise, I know that I sort of just I'm so in the process of creating and I don't want to stop. So that's a constant sort of battle for me as well at the moment that I'm really noticing. And one of my intentions the last couple of months has been, health first.
Oh, I know. It's so important. I mean, like I said, I think self-care always needs to be the number one priority because without that, nothing else will work. And yet, it's incredible how hard it is to accept that and then also to act on it. I don't know if it's particularly women who find it hard to feel like they are allowed to put themselves and their health first. But that's something that I really struggle with too. But I've come to realize how important it is. And I am really trying. I have the same intention at the moment.
Good. So, Miranda, I'd love to just go back to that moment when you made the shift to, the part-time, you decided to go part-time with your teaching and really pursue this blogging. That decision for you at that time, how did you know that was the right next move for you?
I just knew it. I think sometimes in life you do just get these flashes of inspiration when you just know what that next step should be. And I just really felt it within me. And like I said, I was more scared by this very traditional path that I was thinking my life would go in. Not to say that that would be a wrong path in any way or that it wouldn't be, a great life, because it would. But I know that, I'm unique in my own way. I'm different from other people. What I found more scary than the idea of being alone or even being without a sort of stable job was the idea of doing something that didn't really light me up, that didn't sort of really fulfill me, which is always what I want from my life. And it just came to me that blogging, that had always been what had cheered me up in the past. I knew I wanted to do something more creative. I knew I wanted to try to work for myself and to have that kind of freedom to explore my own ideas. I knew I loved photography, and all of that just really came together. And I just sort of instinctively knew that was what I wanted, at least at that stage. That was the path that I needed to try.
And did things flow for you or unfold in, like comparing it to, your teaching career, your blogging career to your teaching career? If you compare the two, did things unfold or flow differently when you're doing the blogging than what they did during the teaching?
I think so. I mean, for me, blogging, I just loved it so much right from the start. And although I liked teaching, it just didn't fire me up in the same way. I think I'd always been used to just working hard, doing my best to do well, and just kind of enjoying the reward of feeling that I was working hard and doing getting that next step, these next steps that you're meant to achieve and achieving them. Blogging is different because, there's no blueprint, there's no plan to exactly how to get to where you want to be. You've got to try and figure it out for yourself. But I mean, right from the beginning, in order to blog, I blogged pretty much every day when I first started. And in order to do that, I had to get up at 5 a.m. every day. I would write before I'd go into teaching, and I would work in the evenings. I'd edit photos. I worked so hard that first real year and a half. But I loved it. I think if I was doing something I didn't love, it would not flow at all. It wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have kept it up. But actually, it was what was keeping me sane. So that is what makes the difference. It was doing something that I found really, really fulfilling, and that helped me in all other areas of my life.
Oh, I love that. It was keeping you sane. And when you made the decision to go part-time, was there also, I'm assuming that there was a part of you that was also scared to let go of this, more secure, old, identity. Was that something that you experienced?
It was a little bit, but to be honest, I was just more scared of winding up, 10 years down the line and then thinking, what have I done with my life? Or actually, this isn't what I wanted to do. I think I was 28 when I started the blog.
Okay.
And I just had this feeling like I need to do it now. Now is the time to try. If I am going to try, then I want it to be now. I don't want to have regrets down the line. That scared me more in the end.
Yeah, so your fear, that outweighed the fear of, the unknown.
Exactly. But I mean, it was also nice to know that I was a qualified teacher if I needed to. I could go back to that. I'm not saying I didn't have a backup plan, but I just felt I needed to try and to see if I did actually enjoy it.
That's lovely. I just wanted to, dive into that there because a lot of people, who listen to this podcast and who are in my community really wonder when they're in that exact situation, how they know when it's the time to, trust and go into whatever that next chapter is. And I think that what you've just described of your own journey, when that fear of like the situation you're currently in is, so much greater than that fear of the unknown, then that's a really great indication. And that's the exact same turning point that I experienced on my own journey.
Yeah, exactly. And also I would always say to people, I mean, it's best if you don't have to completely give up everything and don't just like dive into the deep end. Like I was still teaching when I started the blog. I just lessened my hours a bit, so I had more time. So I think that lessens fear too. If you can somehow work out a way that you're still having some, regular income coming in, maybe you just need to take a cut for a while, but that can lessen the fear too.
Absolutely. And so, Miranda, is there any advice that you would give to, your younger self, reflecting on everything that you know today? And obviously you wouldn't change anything because you wouldn't be where you are right now. But if there was something you could give maybe, 18-year-old Miranda, what advice would you give her?
Well, my number one advice would be to trust your instinct. I mean, too often throughout my 20s, I didn't trust my own instincts about the work that I wanted to do or about other people. But I would say that in the past 2 years, I'm 31 now, I've learned so much more about having faith in myself and also confidence in my own judgment about things. And that's been really life-changing in a way, just really learning to trust yourself, to trust those gut instincts. That's so important.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important one for women as well, learning to trust themselves. And especially, I love that you use the word judgment, that you get to decide, you get to decide, use and be drawing on, that body intelligence, the gut instinct, and just you sometimes you just know, but you can't explain why logically.
Well, exactly. And I think anyone will understand, anyone who's trying to do a bit of an unconventional thing, take a bit of an unconventional career path, you can come up against a lot of disapproval, a lot of judgment about that at the very beginning. I was really lucky in that I had really supportive family, but certainly a lot of my friends weren't very supportive. When I first started blogging, they just didn't understand it. I think they thought I was completely crazy. Which is fair enough. However, you have to learn to not listen to those opinions. You have to learn to trust yourself. I'm not saying don't trust an expert's advice. I would, I always am appreciative of people who really know what they're talking about. In the area that you're interested in, trust what they say, listen to that kind of advice. But for people who don't really know about what you're trying to do, you don't have to listen to them, and you really do need to tune in to what you think is best and pay attention to that.
Absolutely. And especially, looking at who is giving the advice, what
Yeah.
sort of, if there's someone who's, not obviously creatively fulfilled in whatever they're doing, and you want to move into something that's really creative and that's your driver, then they're not going to understand what you want. So not the best person to give advice. And also, of course, if they're, not enjoying what they do at all, don't listen to that person either. So I think that's just having discretion about who's giving the advice. And then even if it is an expert, that's you collect that information and that data. And but if you still are getting some really deep calling to do things differently, then I think you've always got to go with your gut.
Oh, absolutely. That is so important. I mean, especially when I first started blogging, I think so much of the advice was to go really niche. Yeah. And I just didn't want to do that. I really, really didn't want to do that. And I thought, if I feel this strongly about it, then it's not right for me. And I'm so glad I didn't. I'm so glad I didn't listen to that kind of advice at the time.
Oh, yes. You've inspired me with that as well, I've got to say, because that's something I've struggled with as well. And actually, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I've been getting into human design, and I'm a manifesting generator. Oh. Yeah, it's a really fascinating system, but basically it gives you your blueprint, and I think there's 5 different types, and I'm a manifesting generator. And one of the things about those is that we have a lot of different interests, and so they're saying it's better to just continue exploring all of those interests. Don't force yourself, don't pigeonhole yourself into anything. And so I've just been feeling so validated with that, because I'm someone that, like you, has so many different interests, and it doesn't feel right excluding any of them.
No, I really don't think it is. If that's part of your personality, then you definitely need to embrace it. It's so hard to stand out online. It is such an overcrowded platform. And I genuinely believe that the only way you can really stand out, really actually build a committed audience, is if you truly embrace what makes you unique. Because we are all unique in our own way. We all have our own voice. We all have our own things to say. And there is space for everyone. But you're not going to get there by copying anybody else. You really have to embrace what makes you you. And then that's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd.
That's such beautiful advice. And is there any advice that you'd give to someone who's maybe listening to this and is thinking, I really want to find, my passion like Miranda, I really want to find that, whatever that is for me. Is there any advice that you'd give to that person about how they might get started?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is something you've talked about on your podcast in the past, but I really believe in this advice, and that's to think back to what you loved doing as a child. What did you do in your free time? What just gave you that real feeling of joy. I mean, I loved writing, but I loved letter writing as well as creative writing. I think I had about 17 pen pals at one point that I wrote to, which really reminds me of blogging now, because I think of blogging as a bit like a letter out into the world. And I loved listening to audiobooks and I loved reading. And I think it's no coincidence that I wanted to do a podcast down the line. So I'd say, really go back to your childhood. What did you enjoy then? And also think about what really lights you up now, because I think we don't often zone in enough into what truly makes us happy. And I think it's really important to think about that. Think about when you're happiest and why are you happiest then? What do you really love to do? And even if you don't maybe know the answer to that question yet, think about what makes you curious. What just sparks that little bit of curiosity in you that you think, actually, I want to just pursue that a little bit more. I want to try to go further with that. Also think about what you envy in other people. I think Gretchen Rubin gives this advice, and I love her. I love her podcast. And I think it's so true. If you do have a feeling of envy sometimes, if you look at someone, you think, I want that life, or I want to be able to do what they're doing, or you just do feel a little spark of envy, think why? What is it about them or about their life that you want? And how can you then make that happen?
That's a fantastic. They're all great. Everything you said, but I think that last piece we haven't spoken about that at all, and that's such an important point. Who inspires you and why? Asking that why question, getting curious.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, envy isn't a very nice emotion, but sometimes that crops up. And I think you need to pay attention. It's not very nice to feel envious of other people. So if you do envy something, think, well, is there something lacking in your life or in yourself that you want? And then think about how you can create that yourself.
Yes. Well, I always believe that people are mirrors for us. And so those people who are triggering those maybe negative feelings, they're the best teachers for us, I think. So we get a lot of advice to just unfollow this person, just, block this person out of your life. They make you feel bad. They're making you feel jealous or whatever. But I believe that we should lean into that and ask out, and definitely be asking those questions about why that's happening, because I do believe that they are our greatest teachers, actually, and it's just letting us know that there's something within us that they're bringing out that we really need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. I so agree with that. I always think people's reactions to a person say more about that person than, the one they're reacting to. So if you're reacting in a certain way, if there are certain triggers that just set you off with feelings of envy or depression or just not being good enough or something, then I would say, don't ignore that. Think why, why am I feeling like this? What is it that person has that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable or that makes me feel a bit envious? What does it say about me and how can I solve that?
I love that. And without comparing yourself, without feeling like you've got to, you're not good enough or you've got to be them.
No, exactly. You do need to embrace what is unique about you, but other people are out there to teach you more about yourself. I think it's so important if you're going into doing your own business or your own creative project, the best thing you can do is get to know yourself really well, because I think you do have all the answers.
Yes.
Even if that sounds a bit cliched, I do believe that.
No, I believe, I think, for most people, they're looking outside themselves for most of their life. And that's how we get into this situation where we're not doing what we really love. And so it always is this turning back within, like you said, what did I love doing as a child? What do I actually enjoy doing now? A lot of us aren't even connected with what that is because we don't give ourselves the time and space to explore these curiosities and what brings us joy, because it's not serious enough. We've got to get to work. And so I think everything that you've just said there is a really wonderful way for people to get started. So thank you so much for giving us that advice.
Oh, no, thank you.
And so we've spoken a lot throughout this because, appreciating the little things in life and what brings you joy is a big part of, your focus in your day to day and also how you show up online. But I'd love to know, what are you really loving at the moment?
So sort of outside of the work that I do,
Yep.
I am really loving yoga right now.
Mm.
Like I mentioned before, it's a real intention, it's a real goal of mine at the moment to take care of myself a little bit better. And you know how they say that when the pupil is ready, the teacher appears?
Yes.
And I've just discovered the most amazing yoga teacher. Like I've dabbled in yoga on and off over the years, but I never really got into it. But I've just discovered these classes, and the teacher is amazing. And I just adore her classes, and they're just really lighting me up at the moment and making me feel so much better. So I'm absolutely loving yoga right now. I've always loved reading. That's a way that I've always used to calm my mind down and also just to get fresh ideas. I often find I'm so creatively inspired after reading a book, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. There's often something that will just spark a little idea in my mind. So I absolutely love that about reading, and I just find it very soothing. I always read at night. I'm a very difficult sleeper, so I find reading really helps to get me to unwind and relax and get ready for bed. But to be honest, what I do, I mean, my work comes into so much of my free time as well, which I don't mind because I do love it. And it does overlap a bit with play too. I mean, like I love researching possible guests to have on my podcast. I love reading books that publishers send me. I've been doing a lot of theatre reviews at the moment. So I've been given a lot of tickets for shows in London. That's been amazing and it's felt really fun. So that's amazing when work can sort of feel like play too.
Absolutely. And so, Miranda, what are there any rituals that you use to, tune in on a regular basis?
So it would like tune into my intuition or
Yeah, tune into your intuition or just tune into you, sort of shut off
yeah.
the outside world.
Well, meditation is definitely something that I love to do. I really enjoy Gabrielle Bernstein's books and her sort of content online. I know you're a fan of
Love her.
hers as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I think she's amazing, and I really like her guided meditation albums that I have on iTunes. And they're often directed to maybe a particular area of concern or a particular time of day, her guided meditations. So I'll often choose one of those, just whichever feels the most relevant. But I also really like her videos. I think she's the main source of meditation inspiration for me, and I always feel better when I make time to meditate. So that's a goal of mine, is to try and make it more of a daily practice. But also physical exercise is really important to me. I mean, like I said, I did ballet when I was young. Physical movement has always been a part of who I am, and it's really important. And I had a neck injury last year. I had to stop exercising for a while, and I just didn't feel like myself at all. So that's something I'm really building up again, and it just makes me feel so much better. And I think it's really great to have something like that where you can set different goals for yourself that have like nothing to do with your own creative business or with Instagram or anything like that. It's just something completely separate that you can enjoy and you can still enjoy getting better at. To me, that is really helpful, and it just takes me out of my head as well.
Oh, yep, I totally agree with that.
I know, it really is freeing. And then the final thing that I've kind of mentioned before, but it's just learning to pick up on those little warning signals. I think really tuning in to when something starts going a bit wrong, like if you're starting to feel too tired or you're starting to, talk about yourself negatively or feel you're not doing enough, then it's being aware that that's just a warning of something going a bit wrong, like probably needing more rest. So it's being just more self-aware, I think, in that way, and listening to that and thinking, I'm only thinking these thoughts because I'm actually just a bit tired and I need to take a bit of a break. That's all that's going wrong here.
Oh, yes, that's great advice. Absolutely. Just giving yourself a bit of space from whatever you're doing.
Exactly.
Oh, so you've given us so much wonderful advice throughout this. Thank you so much, Miranda. The final question that I'd love to know and that I always ask is, what's in store for you for, the rest of 2018 or just in the foreseeable future as far as you know?
Yeah, well, there are a couple projects that I'll be really working on throughout the rest of the summer. I'm getting my first product ready. Ooh. So it's taken me ages to decide on any kind of product because I really wanted it to get it right. I really wanted it to just be something that felt right to me, that I felt fitted with my sort of brand as well. So, but now I've had the idea, I'm really excited about it, but I need to write it now.
Yep.
I need to really get started on it now, but I'm really excited to do that this summer. And then I'm also sort of building a bit more of a professional website for myself where I am going to start offering some services. I've been casually helping people with their blogs and so on and off for a while, but I'd really like to offer some one-to-one mentoring, especially for micro influencers and small businesses. I really want to help micro influencers understand that they are important within social media, that brands do want to work with them, but also how to really be authentic with your brand and how to get those steps into place that you can then really build on. So I'm really excited about that as well. But other than that, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm really looking forward to this second half of the year.
I love that. I think, the product that you've got in store, whatever that is, I'm sure it's going to be of such service to your community. And I think, I couldn't think of a better person to offer this one-to-one mentoring services that you're, going to offer, formally at some point. So I can't wait to see that, and your new website. That's really exciting. I'm going through a bit of a revamp at the moment myself, and it's just so nice to see, the growth when you do these things, even though, they take a lot of time. So, thank you so much for coming on, Miranda. You, as I said, have just been such, just given us so much wonderful advice. I've got lots of notes here and I can't wait to, go back and reflect on these as well and to share this conversation with everyone. So thank you so much. It's such a treat to have you on the podcast and also to have you in my, Instagram community and to be seeing, your really inspiring posts each day. So I just want you to know that you are being appreciated and that, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your time with us.
Oh, thank you so much for those lovely words, Leticia. That's so kind of you to say. And I've had so much fun with this conversation. Thank you for having me on. And I so admire what you do as well. You're such a positive, inspiration to everyone else, and I think your personality just comes through as being so encouraging and warm, and you really do bring out the best in other people too. So it's been really lovely having this chat.
Oh, thank you so much, Miranda. That's so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So there it is, my friend. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Miranda. Miranda, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast again. I left this conversation feeling so inspired. I absolutely agree that when it comes to creativity, we've got to be broadening our understanding and definition of what is creative. I actually have on my YouTube channel a video on this exact topic, and this is something we also explore in my online course, Embrace Your Feminine Essence. So I really appreciated everything that Miranda shared with us in this conversation. And I hope that this inspires you, my beautiful friend listening, to really embody whatever your message is, whatever your unique combination of skills, experience, and interests is. I really, really do. Finding our authentic voice is so liberating, and I absolutely believe and agree that we all have something worth sharing. So if you'd love to connect with Miranda, definitely go and check out her Instagram at Miranda's Notebook. You can also find her blog online at www.mirandasnotebook.com and her Tea and Tattle podcast at teaandtattlepodcast.com. Now, in addition to checking out my YouTube channel, Create a Life That Is Beautiful TV, and letting me know whether a Facebook group is something that you'd find supportive, I've also got 2 exciting events coming up. The first is an online workshop on the 19th of August with Kelly Track, who has been on the podcast before. Kelly and I are running an online workshop that will go for 2.5 hours, which will help you in sharing your message. We'll be talking about how to share it, what medium to use, how to start a podcast, how to find the right people to talk to, all of these useful, practical tips that goes into it once you find out what your message is and you're ready to share it. You will be able to attend live or catch the replay, depending on when you're listening to this. Those who are attending live or catching the replay, you will have the opportunity to ask us questions as well, which will be really, really valuable for you. So if you would like to purchase your spot, go to leticiaringe.com/shop/share your message. And then the other exciting opportunity to work with me in an event is I'm also running some moon ritual series, which is super exciting. So our first is going to be on the 7th of September in London. It's a 2-hour guided ritual that will connect you with the energy of the new moon and the beautiful Virgo energy that we will be experiencing at that time. I am running this workshop with my friend Caitlin Bookless, and we're so excited to welcome you for those who are based in London. So come and join us, and you can book your ticket at leticiaringe.com/shop/moon series. Okay, that's it. That's all the announcements for today. I hope you have a really beautiful week, and I will be back here next week with another episode to help you unlock your truth and purpose. Thank you so much for listening. Tag Miranda and I on Instagram at Create a Life That Is Beautiful and at Miranda's Notebook, and let us know what your key takeaways are from the episode. Okay, my friend, bye.